here's our cornea right here, the optic nerve right here. You're just going to cut it in half like that. Okay, so you're literally just going to like take your scissors, put the sharp end into the eye, cut in a circle. Okay, that's all you're going to do. Now when you do that cut, I'm going to draw your attention to this one right here on the screen. That's what they did to make this cut here. And you can see that there's like this really thin membrane inside the eye. And you can see where the membrane's been slightly removed right here. Can everyone see that? This is the retina. And if you're not very careful, you'll pull the retina right out. Okay? It happens very, very easily. So it's nice to be able to see it in its sheet-like state surrounding the eye. So try really hard when you're doing this not to like pull the retina out. That's always kind of a bummer. All right. Also on your sheets that we have on page 4, I noticed earlier that under the model section it says that you don't need to know the choroid or retina in the models, but you do. Okay. So put some X's in those boxes. So you need to know all the parts of the eye for the models. For choroid and retina, put some X's in there. Great. All right. So now we'll move on to the sclera. So remember the sclera is just the white of the eye. So here on this view we can see the white right here. This would be the cornea. So the cornea is like the front of the eye that's usually clear. The cornea usually gets cloudy after the sheep dies. Sheep have very, very thick cornea, which you'll see when we cut this off so that we can actually see the iris. And when the proteins start to break down, I think that's what causes the discoloration. So it's kind of this milky color in our eyes. So again, that's the cornea and the sclera, the two outer layers. Now I'm going to move on to this eye here to talk about the retina and the choroid. So here you can see the white outside just barely. That white outside would be our sclera. Working our way in, the next layer is going to be black. So you can see right here where the number 8 is. There's that black piece. That's the choroid. And then this big sheet is the retina. So the retina will cover all of it, but it's really, really thin, such a thin membrane. So be very careful again when removing that. Here on this one, we have another view of the choroid. And it's kind of cool because they also have this sheen on their eyes. Kind of looks like an iridescent, like turquoise or blue sheen, which is really cool. But we don't specify that. It's human anatomy. We just call all of this the choroid, okay, even the colored part. Okay, so next, note that we don't need to know the ora serrata. Remember the ora serrata was the line between the retina and the ciliary body. Because the retina detaches so easily, it's impossible for us to have that be a section, so it's not. Now, when we do our cuts like this, you'll look at the anterior portion of the eye straight down and see something like this. So this is like basically looking through the eyes of the sheep would. This muscle here that you see, it literally is going to look like the underside of a mushroom. That's the ciliary body. It's the mushroom. Now again, when you cut this open, you'll see that the lens will sit right here. But like I mentioned on Monday, it likes to come out with the vitreous body. So here we have kind of like the insides of the eye. Here's the vitreous body. It's going to be like gel. Kind of like has the consistency like hair gel almost. And the lens oftentimes comes out with it. So here's our lens. And it kind of looks like an egg when it sits in the scoop, doesn't it? I think that's so funny. And it's also kind of cool, like the lens is not that clear. You always expect it to be clear since it does, like it makes you see, but it's kind of this foggy color. All right, now to see the iris, the best way to do that, we'll have our half of an eye that looks like this. Just cut the cornea off of the sclera. Okay, and again, this is really tough, so you're kind of going to have to do the same thing where you jab the scissors in and then cut all the way around. And if you do that, you'll see the lens, okay? In this view, they've actually taken the lens out, and you can see it here, but in order to do that, we have to dissect the eye in like kind of a different way, so we'll just leave it like that. If you want and you're kind of ready to like toss the eye, you can pull the ciliary body off, and then if you flip that over, you'll see the lens on the front side. Okay, so if you do want to get a view like this, that's how you would do it. On this, you just gently lift up the ciliary body, and it comes off fairly easily. Okay, now the pupil would be obviously the hole in the middle of the eye. If we're going to show that for the sake of the exam, what we do is we put an eye like cornea down like this on the tray, but we'd remove the cornea. So we'd pin the center right here where the cornea usually is, but we'd remove it so it's not confusing. You don't think we're pinning the cornea in like an awkward way. So we'd basically just pin through the hole to ask for the pupil in this location. Alright, so for the anterior and posterior cavity, remember that's just the hypotheticals. Everything in front of the lens is anterior, everything behind the lens is posterior. Alright? Now to point it out again, the vitreous body is this gelatinous type substance that you'll see when you puncture the eye or when you come out. And it actually does come out in like a decent coagulation like this. It doesn't fall apart very easily. You kind of have to like cut it if you want it to come apart. So when you're actually cutting the eye open, don't worry about this getting destroyed in the process. It's very hard to destruct this. Next we have the optic nerve and the optic disc. We're going to see the optic nerve externally and the optic disc internally. So here on this eye, you can see the optic nerve. This would be the back of the eye and the sclera on the back of the eye and the optic nerve coming out of it. Now when we get our eyes, you'll notice that they aren't clean like this eye is, for example. You're going to get an eye that has musculature and some fat, sometimes even some like lashes and other muscles attached to it. So before you get started, you have to cut away enough of the extra tissue to actually see the eye parts and get to the sclera, alright? So it doesn't have to be perfectly clean like this, but definitely clear around enough of the space so that you can feel confident in identifying what you need to identify, right? So with that, the optic nerve is going to be embedded in a lot of that fat tissue because the eye actually has like a decent amount of fat that surrounds it. So don't get too happy cutting the stuff away at the back of the eye because you don't want to accidentally cut off the optic nerve. So in order to find it, cut around like the stuff in the front first, and then before you cut the stuff in the back, you're going to find the optic disc, and that will lead you to where the optic nerve is. Okay. So here in this portion, if you see the retina sometimes comes off like this, after you've identified the retina, what you can do is you can kind of pull it gently away using the poker, and you'll notice that it all starts to kind of gather at one point. The retina gathers at the optic disc internally, all right? And that's what we'll be pinning as the optic disc, is that place where all of the retina gathers up, okay? So I can't really show it to you on this one. If you have any questions about that, let me know. But as long as you keep your retina fairly intact, it'll be pretty easy to tell where it is because it will gather really nicely at that point. So optic disc internally where the retina gathers, optic nerve externally where you can actually see it. And obviously the optic disc is going to be like just on the other side. So if you find the optic disc using the retina, the optic nerve will be just on the other side. Okay? Okay, so again, it's going to be one eye per group. Any questions? All right, sounds good. So I'll press out eyes over here on the